Hi, I'm Rorschach the Conservative, and welcome back to my channel, The Conservative Lens. So, I've had a bit of a break, I've had a bit of a rest, and I'm back here to make a new video, only this one is a lot more personal to me, and if you found my previous videos a bit academic, maybe even a bit boring, it's okay, I understand. This one is hopefully going to be a lot less boring because it's a lot more personal to me. And the video is about the problems and the struggles that men are facing in the world today and what we can do about that. So, what do I mean by the problems and the struggles that men are facing today? Well, we'll start with suicide. Suicide is an epidemic amongst men today. It's one of the leading causes of the deaths of men, and in fact, in college-aged men in the USA, it's the second highest cause of death. And men are 3.5 times more likely to commit suicide than women are, and 70% of suicides are white males. So it's an epidemic of death. Now, I think 47,000 men committed suicide in the USA in 2016 alone. And the numbers are similar in other westernized nations. The UK also has similar numbers where men are more than 3 times as likely to commit suicide than women are. And in fact, female suicide has actually decreased in recent years, whereas male suicide has increased a lot. And the problem I have with all of this is that nobody seems to care. No alarm bells are ringing. You don't see anything on mainstream media about the epidemic affecting men. It's just nobody cares. All the focus today is on gender theory and LGBTQ and Me Too and feminism and everything, and nobody cares about what's happening to men. And I think it's a real problem. And another example in which you can see that men are struggling today is in male achievement in both academic and the workplace. So I'll start with the academic side of things. So it's well known that women outnumber men by 50% on college campuses today. For every 4 men on college campuses in the USA, there are 6 women. And again, this doesn't attract any attention. Nobody seems to care. There's still a lot of programs to get more women into college, into university programs, a lot of scholarships and other benefits, but there's nothing like this for men, despite the fact that, in fact, there are now fewer men than women on college campuses, and far fewer. It's not just a little bit, it's a lot less men. But nobody cares, and nobody wants to get more men into education, and or tertiary education, and nobody's asking why there are fewer men in tertiary education. And this translates into low earnings for men. So there's a study which I saw, which is about 6 years old at this point, which said that women in their 20s out-earn men in their 20s, and it's easy to see why. For the average case, if there's a woman with a college degree competing against a man without a college degree, she's going to earn more. Most of the high-paying jobs you require a college degree for at the moment. Maybe that'll change in future, but a lot of the better jobs require a college degree. Even if software engineering is a well-paid career to have, and you don't necessarily need a degree for that. Although it makes it easier to get in if you do have a degree, but a lot of the more traditional professions, accounting, law, etc., if you don't have a degree, you just don't get in at all, or some recognized professional qualification, and a degree makes it easier to get. So it is interesting to note that the gender pay gap, which everyone talks about, doesn't actually exist for people in their 20s. And it might not exist for people in their 30s either, because if you think about it, that study is 6 years old, so the women who were in their 20s back then could probably be in their 30s now. So the gender pay gap seems to be, well, I wouldn't say solving itself, because I think if it's going the other direction, that's not good either. If you have women significantly out-earning men, that's not that's not a victory for me. That's a bad thing. Anyway. Moving on to education for boys under the age of 18, primary school, elementary school, middle school, for high school, whatever you want to call it, boys are struggling there. They're really battling. They're being outperformed by their female counterparts in everything except math. or maths, and even then, there's a lot of boys that are diagnosed with ADHD and prescribed drugs to help them cope. And I think it's a little bit sad that the message is, well, okay, boys are struggling with school. The answer is not to maybe think about how do we school boys and what's changed over the last 50 years, but just give them medication. Give them drugs to make them compliant and make them able to sit still in the classroom for hours on end and absorb material. That's the answer. That seems to be the answer that everyone prefers, and this doesn't sit well with me. I don't like the idea that boys need to be medicated to make it through school. And if they aren't medicated, their chances of success in life, of finding a good career and a job that pays a decent amount of money, is much lower. And again, nobody cares. You'll see odd mentions of this in the news and the mainstream media, but in general, nobody really cares about the fact that boys are struggling today, more so than they ever have. And there's still the focus on feminism, on how bad women have it today. So, anyway, this is what maybe concerns me about, is that nobody seems to care. So, what is my personal investment in this? Why do I care? Why am I passionate about this? I guess for me, I had a difficult childhood myself. I battled as a teenager. My early adulthood was very very difficult, and so I see a lot of the young men facing similar challenges that I did. Maybe in some ways I was lucky. I made it through school without needing medication, without needing Ritalin. I have thought about ending my life, but luckily I never did that, and I'm glad that I didn't. But it was very, very challenging for me, and I think it's even more challenging now than when I was a kid. And I'll tell you why that is later, but we'll start with a bit more about me, my personal history and what happened, and where I am now. So my father died when I was an early teenager, and I was devastated by his death. He and I were very close. I really, really loved him. And I was close to my mother too, but the problem is she had mental illness, so she was very unstable, and she became a lot more unstable after my father died. So I guess I instinctively knew that I couldn't really depend on her as a role model. I couldn't lean on her for guidance. She was just too unstable. Even though, I think as a child you kind of instinctively program to revere and respect your parents. But even though this was never a conscious thought of mine, I just knew that she just wasn't a good role model to have. But anyway, she died when I was in my early 20s, so I found myself being in my early 20s without any parents at all, without any grandparents, without any parents. Basically, I wouldn't say alone, but I had no role models to guide me, and I could have found some. I could have found role models that would have helped me, that would have guided me, but the interesting thing is it didn't occur to me that maybe this would be a good idea. And I think maybe this is because my experiences up until that point had made me think, well, what's the point? I can do it myself, and maybe I need to do it myself. And the upside of this is that I taught myself a lot of the life lessons that I think young people need to learn today. I learned them the hard way. I taught them to myself. I learned them myself. It took me a long time. I think a lot of the things that you take for granted, if you have good role models in your life, if you have a good father figure, especially a father figure as far as your masculinity goes, there's a lot of things that a father figure can teach you about masculinity without needing to say anything. Just by being there and interacting with you, you learn a lot from them. And I was deprived of this from an early age, from maybe the most critical age. Because I think when you're a teenager, that's when you're really learning about what it means to be a man, and how it is that you interact with these strange creatures, women. And I didn't have that guidance, and it took me a long time to figure out all these things, and I really battled as a result. And so maybe I'm thinking I can make this series of videos because I can share the lessons that I've learned myself, that I've taught myself, and maybe I can save others the pain that I went through. Maybe I can shorten the time that you struggle. I mean, unfortunately, with the world being the way it is today, I think men are going to struggle, maybe I can make this a little bit easier. So I think the last thing I'd like to talk about today is why it is that men are struggling today. I've mentioned the suicide rates and the achievement, etc., and I believe there's a root cause of this, and I believe the root cause is that masculinity is not embraced by society today. Forget not being celebrated, it's actually vilified. And when you hear mentions of toxic masculinity today, it's no accident that masculinity is talked about as being toxic. And when is the last time that you heard of masculinity being talked about in mainstream media as something positive? It's never said to be positive. It's only ever a negative, toxic thing that you need to rid yourself of immediately. Whereas on the other hand, to be feminine is seen as good. Nobody ever talks about toxic femininity. It's always masculinity that is said to be toxic. And as a young boy or a young man in the world today, I think it's no surprise that you'd feel lost, you'd feel depressed and confused. What is your place in the world today? This core part of you, your masculinity, nobody seems to want it. Nobody seems to want what you have to offer. Because the world is telling you that your masculinity, this very core of your identity as a man, is a problem. It makes you do these bad behaviors. You are terrible to women. You commit crimes against them, etc., just because of the fact that you're a man. Never mind the fact that none of this is actually true. But anyway, so because of that, it's no surprise to me that men are struggling in the world today. I'm fortunately a little bit older, so when I was growing up, there wasn't as much talk about toxic masculinity and all the stuff, and I figured out myself that masculinity is a good thing. It's necessary. It's necessary for us to feel happy as men, and there's a lot of good things about it, but nobody likes to talk about those. So. And this is why people like Jordan Peterson have become so popular, and I think this is what the left misses about it. This is what they don't understand about why people like Jordan Peterson are so popular, is because Jordan Peterson is that father figure that we all wish that we had. We all wish that we could, pick up a phone and phone him and say, hey, I'm feeling lost today. And that's why he's so popular, because he gives you that advice that you wish that you could get. And maybe the reason why people want that advice is because maybe, like me, their fathers died, or there was a divorce, they don't see their father anymore, maybe their father left. There could be any number of reasons why you are deprived of a father figure today. And if that's the case, and I think with divorce rates are only on the rise, and women tend to win custody in almost all cases of divorce, there's very few cases in which men win custody, and men are also in the professions that have the highest death rates of any other profession. If you look at occupation-related deaths by gender, it's men that are overwhelmingly involved in these dangerous occupations, from the military to mining to logging to forestry, fishing, etc. These are all dangerous occupations that are almost entirely undertaken by men. So anyway, the point is that a lot of boys and young men are deprived of their father figures, and this is why they are turning to other places for guidance, because they don't know how to fit in. They're looking for somebody to tell them what it means to be masculine and why they shouldn't be afraid or ashamed to be masculine, to be a man. And I'm I don't want to compare myself to Jordan Peterson. I'm nowhere near as wise as he is, but maybe there's a few lessons that I've learned along the way that I can share with you. So I hope that you have found this video interesting, and I hope that you are looking forward to hearing more about what I have to say on the subject. So stay tuned. There will be further videos in this series coming soon. Thank you, and if you liked, please remember to like and subscribe. Bye.